Hello everybody and welcome back to the Halo Chronicle. Today's video is episode 5 in my Contact Harvest series. If you've not seen the previous episodes, a link will be provided in the description below. Last time, both the human and brute forces would prepare for a parley and harvest capital city of Utgard. Johnson and Byrne would put their militia recruits through intense training and exercises to prepare them for the possible return of the alien forces. Harvest AIs, Mac and Sif, would place shipping containers and propulsion pods in space around Harvest. These containers would have markings on them that would point the brutes to a rendezvous point in Harvest capital city of Utgard. The brutes would scan the planet and find hundreds of thousands of Forerunner relics were present on the planet's surface. They would also find out that an oracle was present on the planet. The brutes, led by their chieftain Maccabeus, would land in a botanical garden, which is where the parley would take place. They would meet a human delegation that was comprised of Governor Thune, Roll Peterson, Jalan Alsigny, and Captain Ponder. Johnson and Byrne would act as security, and the militia would be stationed all over the botanical garden. After some back and forth with the brutes, gunfire would break out nearby. The peace talks would quickly turn sour, and a battle would break out. Maccabeus would hit Harvest Attorney General Roll Peterson with his warhammer, killing him instantly. He would attempt to do the same to Governor Thune, but Captain Ponder would step in and take the hit. After some back and forth firefighting, the brutes would retreat to their dropship and leave. Johnson would discover that the gunfight was started by a nervous grunt attacking a militia recruit named Osmo. Osmo would die in the assault. After returning to the rapid conversion, Maccabeus would be informed by Dadab that a second oracle was detected on the planet. This would further infuriate the brute chieftain. After the peace talks failed, the brutes would begin an all-out war with humanity. That completes the recap of the last episode. Let's jump into today's chapter of this story. The second phase of the Minister of Fortitude and the Vice Minister of Tranquility's plan to become hierarchs would be a blackmail scheme. When the Sanchayum left their home world of Janjaquam, they did so out of necessity. The Sanchayum were engaged in a brutal civil war with rivaling factions. The two rivaling factions were the Stoics and the Reformists. The Civil War started with a conflict regarding Forerunner relics, specifically a Forerunner Dreadnought. This Forerunner Dreadnought crash-landed on the Sanchayum homeworld of Janjaquam during the receding of the galaxy following the activation of the Halo Array. The Reformists wanted to study Forerunner technology and learn about its inner workings so that they could replicate it and build better technology. The Stoics believed that interfering with Forerunner technology was sacrilegious. They worshipped Forerunner technology. The conflicting ideologies would lead the two sides to a brutal civil war. The war would only end when the Reformists would take possession of the Forerunner Dreadnought and leave the planet. These Reformists would be the Sanchayum responsible for creating the Covenant. The Reformists would encounter a very serious problem after leaving their home planet. Only about 1,000 Sanchayum would leave their home world aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought. This meant that the Sanchayum would have a very limited gene pool and inbreeding would become a real problem. To solve this, every Sanchayum would undergo genetic scans at birth. If the Sanchayum was found to have genetics that were overly abundant, they would be put on a list of Sanchayum that could not breed. One of these Sanchayum would be the High Prophet of Restraint. The High Prophet of Restraint didn't practice the proper restraint. He impregnated a female Sanchayum. If this were to come to light, he would lose his status as a High Prophet and would likely be sterilized. The Vice Minister of Tranquility would step up and claim the children as his own. This was not done to protect the High Prophet. Tranquility and Fortitude would use the truth to blackmail the High Prophet and force him to step down. The High Prophet of Restraint stepping down would not be enough for Fortitude and Tranquility to ascend to the rank of High Prophet, as there was precedent for the current prophets to just replace him. In order for them to use this situation to their advantage, Fortitude and Tranquility would need the blessing of High Charity's Oracle. The Oracle would be found aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought, which was used as High Charity's centerpiece and power source. Both Fortitude and Tranquility would make arrangements to meet with the Oracle and the religious priest that acted as its caretaker. This priest would be known as the Philologist. The Philologist would be a specially appointed priest of the Covenant's religious order. His duties would be to protect and interpret the Dreadnought's Oracle. He would also be in charge of a team of Sanchayun priests that would study the Dreadnought. These priests would use specially trained Lagolo worms to study the inner workings of the Dreadnought. To do this, the priests would actually cut small holes into the Dreadnought and insert the Lagolo worms inside of the ship. They would then use the Lagolo's findings to reverse engineer Forerunner technology so the Covenant could replicate it. The Covenant marked time and major events as ages. An example of this would be the Grunt Rebellion. The Grunt Rebellion would mark the 39th age of conflict. After the rebellion was put down and peace returned, the Covenant would move into a new age called the 23rd Age of Doubt, which is where they currently stood. Each time the Covenant ushered in a new age, it would coincide in the raising of 3 new High Prophets. Fortitude and Tranquility believed that the discoveries made on Harvest would usher in the Age of Reclamation and would lead to their ascension to the rank of High Prophet. To push the Covenant into this new age, they would need the Oracle's blessing, and they would also need to find a third Sanchayun to join them. Fortitude and Tranquility would meet with the Philologist and the Oracle. They would present their evidence to the Oracle. This Oracle, which had not spoken in hundreds of years, would suddenly awaken. It would activate previously dormant systems on the Forerunner Dreadnought. This would send shockwaves through High Charity. The Oracle's eyes would open. It would state that it had finally found its masters. It would state that for thousands of years, it watched as members of the Covenant would incorrectly translate a Forerunner glyph. The glyph the Covenant hierarchy interpreted as reclamation was actually the symbol for Reclaimer. This meant that all of the supposed Forerunner relics on Harvest were actually Reclaimers chosen by the Forerunners to inherit the mantle of responsibility. A discovery of this magnitude would shake the very foundation of the Covenant and would call into question the Sanchayun's leadership. After hearing this, Fortitude became determined to suppress the truth and preserve the Covenant. The Oracle would begin to activate the Forerunner Dreadnought's engines. It would state that it would go to Harvest and pick up the Reclaimers. It would then take them to the Ark and help them claim the mantle of responsibility. Desperate to stop this Oracle, Fortitude and Tranquility ordered the Philologist to disconnect the Oracle from the Dreadnought's systems. Before anyone could act, the Dreadnought would suddenly and abruptly lose power. Scorched Lagolo worms would burst through one of the Dreadnought's walls. These Lagolo would inadvertently disconnect the Oracle from the rest of the Dreadnought's systems. Fortitude and Tranquility would then talk about what had just taken place. Fortitude would state that they must ascend to the rank of High Prophet and order the elimination of these Reclaimers. For if the truth were ever released, it would surely mean the end of the Covenant. Tranquility would ask them what they should do about the Philologist. Fortitude would state that he would be an excellent choice to be their third High Prophet. After assisting Mac with positioning various shipping containers and propulsion pods throughout the space surrounding Harvest, Sif would wait patiently for Mac's next set of instructions. He would ask her to deactivate Harvest shipping operations and reduce communications with Harvest. This was done to draw attention away from her data center on the Tiara space station above Harvest, but unfortunately it would not work. A Covenant spacecraft would dock with the station and deposit several squads of grunts. Sif would reach out to Mac for help. Mac would appear in her data center. It would offer to take her to safety. Before Sif could accept this offer, she would notice differences in Mac's appearance. These differences would set off alarm bells for Sif, but what would really unsettle her is Mac's eyes. He would have a blank stare with glowing red eyes. Sif would identify that the AI was not Mac and was in fact Loki. Before she could react, Loki would capture her and overload her processes. Sif would be forcefully shut down to prevent her from falling into the Covenant's hands. Before she would completely shut down, Loki would say that Mac wanted me to spare you, but I can't risk you falling into the enemy's hands. Maccabeus would report the information his crew gathered at the parlay back to the Vice Minister of Tranquility on High Charity. To his surprise, the Vice Minister ordered him to glass the planet, despite the planet having hundreds of thousands of Forerunner relics on it. This order would make Maccabeus very suspicious about Tranquility's intentions. He would defy Tranquility's orders even though many of his pack and crew disagreed with his decision. This would include his second-in-command and nephew, Tartarus. Maccabeus ordered his crew to invade the planet and collect any Forerunner relics they could find. After the failed parlay, Harvest Governor Thune would reveal the presence of the Covenant to all of Harvest's inhabitants. He would ask that all of Harvest citizens come to the capital city of Utgard for their protection. Many of these citizens would disregard the governor's warning, and they would pay dearly for this mistake. The Brutes would invade a nearby city called Gladshine. They would use spirit dropships and squads of Yanmei, or drones, to corner the city's inhabitants. Jalan Alsigny and Loki would create a coordinated plan to help the city's inhabitants escape. The Harvest Militia would help load the citizens into shipping containers that would be transported to Utgard. While loading the last of the civilians onto shipping containers, an angry Johnson and Byrne would see the brute chieftain Maccabeus land his spirit dropship and begin terrorizing trapped citizens. After realizing that one of these citizens survived the attack, they would spring into action. They would use a warthog to strafe the enemy and draw their attention. Maccabeus would jump into the air and attempt to land a devastating blow on the warthog with his gravity hammer, the Fist of Rucht. Johnson would swerve out of the way and punch the gas. They would hit Maccabeus with the warthog and pin him against another nearby vehicle. Maccabeus would howl in pain. The force of the warthog would shatter one of his thigh bones. A spirit dropship would appear overhead and point its plasma cannons at the warthog. After seeing the chieftain, the spirit would stop dead in its tracks. Maccabeus would attempt to push the warthog out of the way, but Johnson would punch the gas again, which would slam the brute back into the opposite vehicle. While Maccabeus was pinned, Johnson knew that the Covenant forces would not make a move. With that in mind, he had Byrne recover the injured civilian and put him in the warthog's passenger seat. Johnson would then put the warthog in reverse and speed away like a bat out of hell. Another spirit dropship would follow Johnson and Byrne. Johnson would request assistance from Mac. Mac would give Johnson a specific route and ask him to move as fast as possible. Just when it seemed like the dropship was going to get the UNFC staff sergeants, several automated Jotuns would slam into the dropship. The spirit would flip over end and crash on the planet's surface. Johnson and Byrne would then ramp the warthog up into the last shipping container. Corman Healy would be there waiting to assist the injured civilian. After his leg was severely injured in Gladshine, Maccabeus would return to Rapid Conversion. He would exit his spirit dropship and immediately be thrusted into chaos. Several of the Yanmei resented Lighter Than Some, who had assumed their role as the ship's maintenance team. Because of Lighter Than Some, the Yanmei were forced into a combat role on Harvest. To regain their maintenance duties, several Yanmei attempted to kill Lighter Than Some. Thanks to the quick action of Tartarus, Lighter Than Some was saved from this attack. When Maccabeus entered the docking bay, Tartarus was in a vicious rage. He was shooting the Yanmei with his spiker and clutching Lighter Than Some with his other hand. Maccabeus ordered both sides to stop fighting. He then ordered Tartarus to release the engineer at once. Tartarus would decline and would turn his rage towards Maccabeus. To get Tartarus back under control, Maccabeus slapped Tartarus across the face, leaving claw marks. Tartarus finally submitted and released Lighter Than Some, who had nearly suffocated. After some quick investigation, Maccabeus ordered the execution of 2 Yanmeis who had led the attempt on Lighter Than Some's life. The rest of the Yanmei quickly submitted to Maccabeus. To better understand Lighter Than Some, Maccabeus ordered his crew to fetch Dadaab, his translator. Dadaab would reveal that Lighter Than Some was very upset and stated that if Maccabeus didn't control the Yameh better, it would undo all the repairs it had made. Lighter Than Some would then reveal the creation of 4 vehicles using parts from the damaged Spirit dropship. They were intended to be gifts to the humans, but the brutes saw them as weapons of war to be used on Harvest. These vehicles would become known as choppers. To protect Lighter Than Some, Maccabeus would order Dadaab to take it to the space station above Harvest and see if they could recover any human data from the navigational computers stationed there. After the crisis at Gladshine, Governor Thune would summon all of the militia leaders to the Capitol building. Jalon Al-Signy would relay a plan to the governor that he would strongly disagree with. He believed that the plan would put his people in danger. He ordered his men to seize Jalon, but Johnson and Byrne would incapacitate the governor's personal bodyguards. Jalon would then pull a pistol out and aim it at the governor. Using her military authority, Jalon would assume control of Harvest. Thune would refuse to confirm this change of power with his people. Jalon would then shoot Thune in the chest several times. Both Johnson and Byrne were stunned and upset that it came to this course of action, but after examining Thune, they would quickly change their mind. Thune was hit with stun rounds and was only unconscious. Jalon would then order Loki to reveal their plan to Johnson and Byrne, but before it could do that, Ponder would have something to say. He would ask Johnson to call for Corman Healy as he passed out onto the floor. Ponder's internal injuries suffered at the hands of the brute chieftain had taken a turn for the worst. Ponder's spleen was ruptured and they did not have the time or equipment to save him. All Healy could do was give the captain painkillers. Johnson, Byrne, and Ponder were then given a detailed breakdown of Jalon's risky operation. This will complete today's chapter of this story, but before I leave you, let's talk about some interesting bits of lore tied to today's episode. The oracle that the Minister of Fortitude and the Vice Minister of Tranquility consulted would actually be a fragment of a Forerunner artificial intelligence known as Mendicant Bias. At the end of the Forerunner Flood War, Mendicant Bias's core was sentenced to be imprisoned in a chamber below a desert on the Ark, but fragments of the AI would be stored on the Halos and some key Forerunner ships, including this Forerunner Dreadnought. Wallace Jenkins would be particularly distressed during the evacuation of Gladshine. His parents lived in a nearby village and failed to report to the city for the evacuation. After some time passed, it became clear that they did not survive the brute attack of their homestead. Jenkins was devastated. The vehicles created by Lighter Than Some were based on a Jotun prototype it saw on This End Up. The choppers were supposed to be an advanced human-controlled Jotun, but brutes would see them as weapons and use them in the conflict that took place on Harvest. Next time, we will discuss Lighter Than Some's betrayal, Captain Ponder's last mission, and the risky operation that would attempt to save the human citizens of Harvest. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. The next episode will be the last in this series and will conclude Contact Harvest. I hope you all have been enjoying so far. I will announce the next series that I will cover soon. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.